I think we'll get started. It's 1 o'clock, Chief. Is that right? And we got our consultants online. Zach and who else? I don't have a name. Zach Gill and?
Michael Rosenbaum.
Mike, okay. Jim Mahoney, Mayor Fargo. Just so you don't know who's here, or maybe you do know, but I'll just have everybody do an introduction so you know who you're talking to in case they ask questions. And it will allow for more open discussion in that regard. So Tim Mahoney, Mayor Fargo.
Michelle Turnberg, Fargo City Commissioner.
Dave Pepcorn, City Commission.
Dave Zabalski, Police Chief.
Denise Kolpak, City Commission.
So I think, Chief, you're going to give a few opening comments, and then we're going to have the consultants give their report. Is that correct?
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you. Thanks, Commissioners, for taking the time to sit down for this. This is a first ever community-wide benchmarking survey that our department has ever done. Zen City, I'm sure they'll give you some of their credentials, but they're a very well-respected, renowned company that does this work across the United States with a multitude of not only police agencies, but cities in general in terms of things, public safety and city amenities and things like that. So what they focused on, particularly on the PD side, was obviously public safety. And one of the things that we, when we met with them and went over preparation for questions, was we didn't want a generic survey. We don't want a survey that just says, hey, do you feel safe, yes or no? Because that doesn't tell you any level of detail in which we can actually address that. So there's some drilling down pieces to this. I think the really excellent components are the way in which they were able to drill down by police beat. So we have representative responses from each area of the city, not just one area of the city, in terms of what each area's concerns are. And as you'll see as they go through this, each beat has different concerns and different levels of concerns about certain issues. And then they'll talk about their top three overall. That was important. And then also the level of drill down detail in terms of those specific pieces is in here as well. And so I think this is a really interesting and good first step for the police department that would be a starting point for some future surveys of this nature, because now that we kind of have a gauge, we can start addressing and drilling down into this a little more, and then maybe do another survey in the future to evaluate progress in these different areas. But I think as a first survey experiment, I think is done pretty well, and we're happy with where we're at. So I'll turn it over to Zach and company at Zen City to talk about the specifics. And I think the other part of it is, for your edification, is just understanding what these results mean, so that when you're looking at the report, you're interpreting what those results are based on how the survey was conducted and the folks doing it. Thank you. Go ahead, Zach.
And Zach and Mike, Commissioner Strand just joined us, so we have all the whole commission is here today, and he's at the table. So,
hey, thank you, Chief. I appreciate the introduction. And as he said, my name is Zach. I've been working with Fargo for about a year now. We do actually have one more member of our group who is, he's joined, but he wasn't, he's trying to get access to be a presenter. So he should be here soon. Hopefully, oh, there he is. All right, now we have our full party here. Great. Just wanted to make sure everyone was here. So joining me today, and I'll let everyone else introduce themselves just to give you a little bit of background, but I'm going to share my screen first so you can see the presentation results as we go through this. So just to give you a little bit of heads up of what we'll do, we'll start with our introductions, so you know who we are. Then I'm just going to give a couple of the really top-level highlights to kind of frame everything, at which point we'll dive into the methodology and let you know how the survey was run, what our methodology was, any questions you might have about that, and then we can get into kind of the full results of this public safety survey from there. So again, my name is Zach. I'm the Customer Success Manager. I'll let Michael introduce himself.
I need to unmute myself. I'm Michael Rosenbaum. I lead methodology at Zen City, doing a lot of work to make sure that our survey products are representative and reliable to inform public decisions like the ones that you're making. And then I'll hand it over to Eyal.
Hi, everyone. Eyal Halamish. I'm the Vice President of Account Management here at Zen City. I've spent a bit of time actually in Fargo meeting with a number of your key departments to understand how to customize the solution to understand what's most relevant and important for the city of Fargo. And I've also been working with the police department on the survey work here. I also support about 400 other cities that we work with nationwide with this type of data. So, and specifically have an emphasis on how we support law enforcement and looking at this data set to inform how we tackle crime and how we also improve some of the sentiment issues that we see in our communities. But excited to be with you all.
Great. And last we have Tori Escobar, who I'll let introduce herself too.
Yeah, nice to meet you all. My name is Tori. I work closely with Zach supporting the account here, and I run more of the commercial aspect of the business, but really excited to look through these results with you all today.
All right, so thanks for bearing with us as we introduce ourselves. Just looking at the highlights, the survey that we ran asked kind of 4 key questions about residents' perceptions of the police and their sense of safety. And I think the overwhelming top line, if you take nothing else home from the survey, is that Fargo residents feel overwhelmingly positive about their safety and their relationship with the police department. So if you look at the top left there, 61% of residents feel mostly safe or completely safe in their neighborhood, compared to 39% that say negative. So almost two-thirds of residents feel very safe in Fargo. Specifically, we asked about their neighborhood that they live in. Moving to the right, 70% of residents strongly agree or tend to agree that people in their community have a voice when they communicate with the police department, compared to just 13% negative. So even more overwhelmingly positive about kind of their voice and say and way they communicate with the police in Fargo. 56% of residents strongly agree or tend to agree that the police department acts in fairness towards its people, compared to 19% negative and 25% neutral there. And then 73% of residents in the most positive strongly agree or tend to agree that the police department treats people with respect, compared to just 10% negative. So again, we'll go into the methodology in a little bit, but just really, we're going to go through a couple of these slides just to kind of give you your top line of situating everything before we kind of explain things were. So looking just kind of at a glance, and I know there's a lot of data to take in here, so it's definitely something to spend some time in as we go. But if you look on your right there, you see all the different questions that we asked. So we asked 2 questions about the Fargo Fire Department. The rest deal with police departments. And you can see that the top drivers of satisfaction with the police department on this list: willingness to contact the police department. How willing would you be to contact the Fargo Police Department if you were the victim of a crime or saw a crime? You can see 80% of people say that they would be willing. And that's a fundamental show of trust in the police. If people who don't trust the police aren't going to contact the police. In this case, 80% do. And then also, how much do you feel that the police would treat you with respect if you had contact with them for any reason? 74% of Fargo residents said that, yes, they fundamentally believe that, compared to just 12% there. And you can see this is, again, in order of most positive rather than most negative. You can see down towards the bottom there, kind of the biggest opportunities for the police department to really focus in on. How sufficient are resources in the city of Fargo for individuals with mental illness, at 33% positive and 38% negative, 29% neutral there, kind of indicating probably unsure, unclear. And then, to what extent are you satisfied or dissatisfied with how the Fargo Police Department is addressing property crime? That one that's cut off there, again, 38% positive, 47% neutral, 15% negative. I think that really high neutral there really indicates people that have not experienced property crime, so they don't have an answer to this, but still only 38% positive there. And you can see there's really a pretty big gap between those two, and then the next least positive, which is positive relationships with the community at 54%. Everything above 50% except those bottom 2 on resources for mental illness and satisfaction with addressing property crime. You can see on the flip side, on the very, very top, both questions asking about response time and satisfaction of interactions with the Fargo Fire Department, overwhelmingly positive, 84% positive for both of those. So Fargo residents very, very happy with Fargo's fire department as well. Looking at the top concerns, this is an open-ended question that asks residents to say, what is the number one issue that you want the police to deal with in Fargo? So it's not asking about, anything more than that. It's an open response, so residents are allowed to respond with as much detail as they want. And it's then organized and classified according to some major topics. So the top concerns there, you can see streets and traffic with 120 and drugs at 30. Those top numbers a little bit off. I fix those. You can see specifically for streets and driving, reckless driving, speeding are by far the top two most concerns of residents. And with drugs, drugs and disturbances related to drugs and community safety related to drugs. And then coming in third, police resources, specifically police presence. So residents asking for an increased police presence in Fargo. You can look here, streets and traffic, the highest issue across most of the neighborhoods except Fargo 2, which is the downtown area where drugs is kind of the main issue. Homelessness is an issue in Fargo 1 and 2 only, while police resources is kind of the third concern everywhere except for Fargo 2, where police resources is kind of the fifth concern. So those are just the top line numbers, really just kind of the highlights I wanted to show before we get into kind of the methodology questions and giving you a little explanation of how we do and how we gathered this, because it's a little bit different than you might be used to. Before any of that, any questions just kind of about those initial numbers that you saw there?
Mr. Turnberg.
Yes, do we have a map that shows us where those Fargo areas are when you mentioned Fargo 1, Fargo 2, et cetera?
Sure, I can do that.
That's a great oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, yeah. I can send you, but it's our police beat maps. So Fargo 1 is north of the airport. It touches a little of downtown. Fargo 2 is our downtown area. 3 is that middle area. And then 4 and 5 are southern areas of the city, 4 being southeast, 5 being southwest, and then it goes up as far north as Shields. And you can, we probably got it on our website as well, the beat maps, but those designate our beats.
Can I ask a question? Why don't we have a hard copy of this and a handout? Why are we just, like I said, why don't we have one right now?
This presentation is one that we have been working on, just kind of finalizing. The presentation and the data itself is available, and we're certainly happy to share it with you. And this is, publicly available, so we're happy to share out this presentation.
Yeah, Archie's with us today, and he ran upstairs to run copies right now, because usually the commissioners like to look at them, to page through them.
Sorry, I apologize for that. I should have sent it a little earlier. Any other questions?
So, Chief, Commissioner Turnberg and I think Commissioner Kolpak went to some of the neighborhood meetings. So the ones we were at were, I think you had Zone 1, and then it must have been 4 and 5, is that right? When we had our neighborhood meetings down at the Sports Center? So we talked 3 of them, but we didn't have a downtown meeting that I'm aware of.
We did have a downtown. That was where we were at Roosevelt School.
But
Was a
we didn't
combined-
hear it, we didn't see it, right? You weren't there or I wasn't there. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah,
And
we've
the only
had-
one you've missed then is 3. You haven't had a
Well,
3
I think
meeting?
we need to do 2 more, actually, because,
Okay.
so we've got one scheduled, I believe in the next week or 2. It'll be Beat 3. We're going to host it over at Public Health. So we'll push that out here once we've got that finalized.
I know, I don't know, you've been at them, I've been at them, they were fun to go to, only because you get to hear from the neighbors and see what they're concerned about, and I think the Lincoln neighborhood, we have some concerns of what's gonna happen, and I think Trish in her neighborhood has a drug house or something, but it's kind of interesting what each unit has or what's going on.
Okay.
I'm happy to jump in.
Yeah.
So as Zach noted, we're just going to jump through a couple, as you've seen some of the top lines, I'm just going to briefly go through some of the methodology of Zen City, how it works, just from a survey research perspective, and also our wider engagement platform. And then we're going to jump, then we have some additional data that goes a bit deeper into some of those top lines that Zach mentioned. So just from a 30,000 foot, Zen City worked with about 400 cities nationwide, where we are an engagement platform that's used to really collect community voice and to use that community voice to empower the work of governments. So we work across cities, but we also work in the law enforcement space. And as you saw on the previous slide, there's a whole bunch of agencies that we work with within your region and also across the country. And you can see that, chiefs will use that information to inform key decisions they're making around resource allocation, some of which is done based on crime data, and some of which is further refined by overlaying this data set to understand where do people, not just where does crime happen, but also where do people fear crime or feel like they feel unsafe. One of the biggest challenges that we tackle as an agency is that the current ways of going out and collecting input tend to be skewed because the residents who are, we're only getting a small portion of the individuals when we interact with them at a town hall meeting or through some of the traditional ways we collect data through phone surveys and things of the likes. So the whole purpose of this is really to get to the average Fargo resident and really understand how do they feel with regards to city services. In order to achieve that, one of the things that we've figured out is we want to get beyond, the same individuals who tend to come to some of these meetings, because we know we're getting that sample already as part of the wider conversation that we're collecting. And so we have a mission of doing three things, which is one, to reach as many residents in your community as possible in as many ways as possible to get statistically representative samples and also other methods to understand what they're on about and want to have incorporated into the decisions that are made inside government, to understand that data in a centralized way so we can pull out some insights that are meaningful, and finally inform action on how do we actually deploy resources, communicate more effectively, or deploy new programs or policies off the back of that information. One of the things that we've identified and is very well known these days is that people are spending so much of their time on mobile devices. We know that about 95% of U.S. adults are using the internet, spending tons of time on screens. And even in your community, we're getting up to that 95% of that community are actively engaging in these types of technologies to provide their input. And so that's the main method we use to engage these stakeholders. And next slide. The technology that's deployed here is really a public safety survey, right? So it's about us deploying a set of questions that are very specific to public safety and understanding perception of the police department and how safe people feel in your community. And what we do is we map out, as was noted before, based on census data, the different breakdowns of your community. So those different geographic areas that the police department uses to do policing. Based on those areas, we look at the census data to identify what are the demographic makeups of those areas. Based on that, we then deploy, we partner with ad agencies to distribute digital ads across your community into those areas. And we're monitoring with our survey researchers to identify, are we hitting a certain demographic sample in each of those areas to make sure we have a strong demographic representation across the whole. So as you see up there, we identify what the demographics are, we target ads, we serve those ads, someone clicks on that ad. Once they complete the survey, we track to make sure they've completed the mandatory questions, including the demographic information, and then we calculate that into the pot, and then we keep targeting until we hit another sample, another survey response to fit into the sample. Just one quick one back, just by example, those are the type of ads that you see, whether it be someone who's playing a digital game like Candy Crush, or if they're reading the Bible app in Spanish, or if they're scrolling through Instagram, an ad will pop up. They'll click through to the ad, they complete the survey within a few minutes, and we do tons of testing to get the conversion rates that we need to be successful in this endeavor. And just one other example on the next slide, with regards to the responses that we get, once we get it as close to sample as possible, we overlay another method called rake weighting, where we will then weight that sample to make sure that it matches your demographics as best as possible. So these are the demographics of your community based on census data. We literally tweak, marginally tweak the responses that we get to make sure that they fit into the relevant buckets across age, but we're also doing, gender, we're also doing ethnicity, We're also doing economic level of economic employment, and so and high school education. You know, there's a range of variables that we're looking to make sure that they all fit into the right demographics. And the next one. One other thing, just as a partner to this is one segment that we're going into, but there is a couple elements to our technology that go beyond just the representative survey that we're going to show you now. For example, we also have other parts of our technology to reach as many other residents as possible. This is one version of that, which allows us to scrape what are people already publicly talking about in the digital realm, whether that be responding to local news articles or whether they're posting things on Instagram or Facebook or the likes, that's related to specific city services, right? So this is an example of, in the last year, we looked at what were some of the things that drove a lot of attention related to the public safety realm, and we could see that there was a spike in communication about the applications for the Join Fargo PD that were primarily driven by promotions by the Fargo Police Department. And then we can also see that, you know, responses are mostly positive about the opportunity to work for the police force. And we can see some of the words that people are posting about when we mention the fact that, you know, applications are still open here and that we're looking to have another class coming in. We know recruitment is a top priority for the police department, so we're actively helping them understand what are other people looking to hear with regards to the police department here. But that was a little bit about the methodology and then going into it. And I won't go too much deeper into it, but there's other elements here where we can then use targeted engagements to get feedback on where do people feel specifically unsafe. This is an example from another agency that has this technology where we can deploy this in the coming months for Fargo as well. We've done it on some of the things with regards to Fargo streets around their projects, but we want to actually deploy it also in some of the policing work that we do. I'll pause there if there's any questions around methodology before we go into the data in a bit more granularity into the subpoints there.
I have a question about how you gained your data, is John Strand, and especially if you're using phone apps and those technologies. With 90-some languages spoken in our community, how do we get to the folks that don't speak English as a primary language, or do we?
Great question. We actually do. So we will target ads in the language of the device that the device is set to. So if someone has their device set to Spanish, for example, the ad will pop up in Spanish. The responses in the survey links are in that language, and we'll be collecting in that language. In the back end, we translate it back to English to make sure that we've captured the responses for the open text. And then, of course, the quant questions are done just based on clicking on the number.
And as you're looking at that subsect of people with different language issues, do we see any other, do we notice any other data disparities? Do they feel happier? Do they feel safer? Do they feel more respected or less? I'm just wondering about some of our marginalized folks in the community and how they see this versus everybody else that's here.
Yeah. Zach, your screen is adjusted. I don't know if you were trying to, but
Sorry, yeah.
I was just going to say that I wouldn't know if you were going to pull up some of the information, but we can definitely do a deeper dive to provide that information to you, Commissioner. But we do have demographic breakdowns for different populations. So once the data comes in, we can look at specific subsets of the community, and we can break that data down into how safe they feel, which parts of the community they feel more or less safe. So we can provide that drill down.
I think part of what John's talking about is you have activists that talk about if you're black, you're going to be treated different than if you're white in the community, and do they trust the officers? And my librarians seem to get along well with policemen, but I have other different refugees groups that feel very unsafe with policemen just because of their relationships in their home country. But I think we'd like to know, in our community, are they feeling willing to ask? The other thing on demographics, if we have an average age of 32, my thought process goes that people over 55 might feel different about police and safety and those issues versus kids that are 25 to 35. So when you showed that graphic about 44% being 18 to 34, just to be curious as will we see a different sense of safety in somebody 55 and over versus somebody 32 and younger? Is that broken down at all by age, that younger people either feel less safe or more safe, and older people feel less safe or more safe?
Yeah, we do have that breakdown. I'm just looking at the slides we have in here. We didn't do all the demographic breakdowns here, but we can that is definitely something that we provide as part of this. And yeah, it's literally plugged into our backend where you can click on a question and break it and literally click to those exact demographic breakdowns, whether they be by ethnicity or by age, to see if there's disparities there. And happy to provide a follow-up to, a follow-up briefing on those specific breakdowns.
Yeah, I was going to say, for the sake of time and kind of, top lines, we went with kind of the biggest, and the main answers to them. But I'm happy to work with Chief and Archie to provide kind of demographic breakdowns on a more kind of complex and granular level.
Yeah, these are questions for later. I think just John and I'd be happy with follow-up questions, but it's just, we understand it's an overview. Thank you.
I also, just one other thing on the language issue, we also run a community survey through the communications department that focuses on, rather than public safety specifically, it focuses on kind of overall satisfaction with city characteristics. And this survey ran in English, Spanish, and Nepalese. So those were the kind of default chosen languages based on the community. But those are designed, that survey is designed to kind of give a more broad picture of overall sentiment, whereas this is obviously very, specific towards public safety responses. So diving into kind of the details a little bit, when you look at the question of, how would you rate your sense of safety, you can see that the numbers are very strong in terms of who said they're mostly safe versus somewhat safe. But you can also see that somewhat safe, that somewhat safe and that mostly safe area is the vast majority of people. So there is a lot of people that are persuadable. They're not completely safe. They're not safe at all. They're willing to have their outlooks changed. So there's definitely a strong group here of Fargo residents that are looking for, to feel safer. And then you can see on the bottom there, you can see on the far left, that's Fargo overall. And then you can see the breakdowns of, how each different police beat answered this question. So you can see Fargo 3 has the lowest overall reported sense of safety at 45%. And you can see Fargo 2, the downtown area, is actually one of the highest, if not the highest, based on those scores.
Bear with me, this is John again.
Sure, yeah, of course.
I'm just wondering, do we correlate this information and superimpose it over actual crime statistics, and are they mirroring each other?
Actually, Commissioner, our intelligence and analysis unit is in the process of doing that once we have final results. So when we do our neighborhood meetings, we are mirroring that information and kind of hitting on what each beat area's main issues were. But I don't think they're far off. But yeah, we will start doing that. We're waiting for this final version to do that. And we wanted to get it in front of the commission first.
And Commissioner, or Chief, can you share that with the commissioners too? Because unless we go to the public meetings, we don't see that. So it might be nice when you have each neighborhood meeting just to send out what you send to the, I know your team does a pretty thorough presentation, but I think we could just, if you just send it to us, we can do with what we want with it. But then John could get that if you're unable to make the meeting. Because it breaks down, some areas are very concerned about traffic, and that's kind of where it gets into. But the officers give a breakdown of how many arrests they're making, what's going on, what the most concerns of that area are. But I think that would be very helpful, because it was helpful for me. I mean, some people was, going up on 10th, it's the racing that goes on 10th, and it's like, I wouldn't assume people will be racing in town, but that's what they're doing, so.
Yes, and so we've just been waiting to get this final report done so that everyone understands the data. But we're happy to push that out, and we can also even do a quick overview at a commission meeting if you want a rundown of any particular beat meeting as well.
When asked two questions, does the police department treat everyone fairly regardless of who they are, and does the police department provide the same quality of services to all individuals? You can see overwhelmingly residents view Fargo Police Department as fair, but there is still a quarter of the population there that is neutral and therefore highly persuadable to improve their perception. Now, this could be made up, we don't ask further on this, so this could be made up of people who have not had any encounters with the police. It could be made up of people who are genuinely, I'm not really sure. There's some good and there's some bad. But what it does tell us definitely is that, there is still, even though we're at 70% here, there's still room to improve on this with, with certain steps. When asked, two questions on how sufficient are resources in the city of Fargo for individuals with mental illness, and do you feel that the number of Fargo Police Department officers you see in your neighborhood is sufficient? So 38%, as we mentioned, feel that the police department does not have enough resources for handling mental illness. This was the most negative of all of the responses. You also see that 30% don't know. Again, most likely people who have not had an experience with this and haven't thought about it necessarily. And you can see that 60% think that the number of police officers they see in the neighborhood is good, but there is still 25%, so a quarter of the population is saying that it's not high enough. Very few people are saying it's far too high or too high, but there is still a quarter of the population looking for more, which supports that, police resources as the third most requested improvement there.
If you could just go back to that slide for a moment, and
There you go.
John, again, I'm just wondering with this regard to, you serve 400 and some cities. I would guess there's probably a similar mindset across the country that local law enforcement aren't up to speed necessarily for handling the complexity of mental illness issues, but are there any that are really excelling at it that we can learn from and mirror what they've done and go, this is something innovative and novel that we should look at locally that does address police involvement with mental illness? I'm just curious what you see.
Yeah, happy to share that we definitely see the full gambit, and it really just depends on the level of resourcing and support we have for initiatives. Also happy to provide some examples after this. We have certain agencies that have kind of a multifaceted approach where they're partnering police, law enforcement professionals with, social workers or mental health professionals on specific locations or even hotspot areas where they tend to see some recurring patterns. But happy to share examples of programs from other cities on how they're tackling some of this stuff, because we kind of see the full gambit, and I think it's just around level of resourcing and what we can apply. And of course, at the end of the day, it comes down to commission and the police chief himself to decide how we can best apply that based on the resourcing that we have locally.
There you go. Skipped one slide by accident there. So you can see when asked, to what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statement? The Fargo Police Department is an open and transparent organization. 33% agree, but 33% are neutral on this question. So it's definitely an area for improvement in terms of transparency. Again, it remains to be seen if that is an issue of people who just don't know and haven't thought about it, or if it's people who really feel, there's a lot that could be improved, but it's not bad. But definitely an area, and this is a not uncommon thing. People want increased transparency from their police force, and so definitely, again, continuing to fit in with the kind of theme of a strong 25 to 33% persuadable population here. Residents overwhelmingly believe that the Fargo Police Department is respectful. They were asked two questions on this. Does the police department treat local residents with respect, and do you feel that they would treat you with respect if you had contact with them for any reason? You can see, 70%, above 70% on both of these. Treating local residents with respect, again, about 20%, 15% neutral here, continuing this, a little bit lower than the rest. But the overall trend that we see with these answers is that the negatives are pretty low on most of them, and that it's the neutrals that are the big block rather than the negatives. which, I mean, as you know, policing is a polarizing topic. So the fact that people aren't in the negatives on these questions is a very, very good sign that these are people that are certainly willing to move towards the positive.
I'm just chuckling to myself, but I'm wondering if we had a survey, what would our police department, law enforcement people feel about our citizenry? I'm guessing there's times they're not treated with respect either.
Asking, similar to respect, when residents were asked if they feel that they have a voice when dealing with Fargo police. Again, are the police approachable? Do they listen to and take into account the concerns of local residents? Overwhelmingly positive, but once again, and once again, very small numbers in the negatives with a solid block in that neutral. Again, I think with this question, this is definitely a matter of people who have not necessarily had interactions with the police. You know, you don't know if you have a voice or if they would listen to you and if you haven't experienced that. And so you can see on that one on the left, 26% of people aren't sure about this. So look, we asked 2 more questions. How willing would you be to contact the Fargo Police Department if you were a victim of a crime? And during the last 6 months, did you report to the Fargo Police Department something that happened to you which you thought was a crime? And you can see 80% of people said no, nothing happened to me. That's a good thing. You can see 9% said something happened to me, but I did not report it. And then 11% said, yes, I did report something. Obviously, that 9%, it's a small percentage, but obviously always an area of concern. With all of our departments, there's always a percentage of people that answer that. I haven't seen, and 9% is a pretty low number, but still, you know, there is that roughly 10% that would say no. And you can see fairly willing and very willing to contact the police department if you were a victim of a crime. But there is still, you know, again, around 15% saying, you know, I don't think I would be willing.
Question for you. So is this out of every resident in Fargo? I'm just looking at the numbers of respondents, 485, 42, 48, 499. What's the probability that this is actually encompassing what Fargo residents are actually feeling with such a low number of respondents in relation to our population?
That's a great question. I'm going to turn it over to Michael, our methodology person for this one.
This is the fun one. So I'm gonna just repeat back a little bit of context about the survey statistics here, and then describe a little bit of what this is providing in terms of a representative and precise sample. So really, this is a question of what is enough sample size to understand a population well. Generally speaking, we really need a relatively small number of people to provide a precise understanding of any area that we're surveying in. For example, national pollsters use around 1,000 people to understand sentiment across all of America, which is, you know, 340 million people. And this is because sample size is mostly related to the size of the sample you're surveying, not the size of the overall population. So how we choose sample is we have a minimum that we, around 400 responses that we ensure for every survey to guarantee that there's enough sample to provide reliable estimates to understand core perception ideas in any jurisdiction that we're working with, including Fargo. What we do, though, is we increase that sample when we need to understand subdivisions better, like, for example, the police beats. So in this case, we target a sample of 500 people to get a reliable and fairly precise understanding of sentiment with the ability to break out to each of the different beats there. The other thing that we're balancing here, right, because you could imagine the response would be, let's just sample everybody. The more you increase sample size, you start to get a meaningful cost of what we call sample burnout, where residents tire of taking surveys and then slowly stop responding over time. The larger sample means that we risk the survey becoming actually less reliable because some groups respond less frequently and post hoc statistical adjustments such as weighting perform less well. So what we're trying to do here is get enough that we have a really reliable measure of perception, and 400 to 500 is fairly standard, in polling and gives you a fair amount of detail and reliable understanding of what people are saying, while also trying to avoid risks to representation and burnout that would prevent future surveying. Does that help answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, Zach, back to you. I know.
No, that was great. Thank you, Michael. This is why I leave it to you. This is a follow-up question specifically, so you can see 36 respondents, because this question was specifically asked to those 9% of people that said, I did not report the crime. For which, if any of the following reasons, did you not report this crime to the Fargo Police Department? You can see the two biggest ones were, I didn't think reporting it would make a difference, and I do not trust that the report would be taken seriously. Obviously, those are concerning responses. It's a small sample size, but it's still enough to know that, you know, that's a serious issue. It's definitely something we see as the top two responses, I would say, across most of our departments. So, and that's a trust issue. People not reporting crimes, you know, people aren't going to report crimes because they don't trust that something is going to be done here. So definitely some areas to improve, which is expected. And a lot of what this survey does really will help Fargo PD, you know, hone in on those areas where they can make a direct difference in people's lives.
Just to clarify on that, the percentages, just so you know, these are multi-select, so that's why the percentages might look higher than the right amount. They can select a few reasons why they didn't, just so we get some of that granularity.
So is there anywhere in the city of Fargo you consider unsafe? You can see that 64% of people responded yes, there is, and 36% responded no. They were then asked a follow-up question about where that is, and that is something that we can provide. It's too long of a list to present, but there is a list of kind of specific locations that people provided to that. And then perhaps one of the aspects that I find most interesting and most telling, they were then asked another follow-up question: why do you consider this place unsafe? And you can see the number one response, the most common response here was news reports. And so you see that it's not people personally witnessing a crime. It is the impact of media. And when you combine news reports and social media, you see a really, really strong power of media in this. And I will say that this is something we're seeing again across a lot of our departments, the power of especially social media increasing and in people feeling unsafe, which becomes a particular challenge for the police department to combat, you know, when crime statistics are lower, but people are still feeling unsafe because of stories they're reading and how much that can spread compared to perhaps what the reality is actually on the streets of Fargo.
And just another quick call out there. Again, this is a multi-select question, which means that people can identify a few. They're asked to select a short list, of which they can allocate a few votes as to what is the reason. And not overwhelmingly, but 65% to the next 44%. You're seeing news reports before the other categories, as Zach noted.
And so another question we asked was, to what extent does the Fargo Police Department develop positive relationships with community members? 54%, so the majority believe that the PD develops strong and positive relationships. There's still 41% that are either unsure or lukewarm. So you see a little and don't know there, especially at 41%. So another great opportunity to kind of dig for more information, perhaps in a follow-up survey or in some other ways, you know, out on the street. And of course, strengthen the tie with community policing to build this here. This is one of the, you know, primary ways that people are going to trust and feel that they have a voice if they're having specific interactions with the police on a community-based level. And then finally, kind of the last ones, and we mentioned these before, in a majority of respondents, 56% have interacted with the Fargo Fire Department, and a strong majority report positive interactions, 84%. The vast majority of residents have not had an emergency or service-related interaction. and have either not interacted at all with the fire department or done so at community events or hydrant flushings. I am sure that probably coincides with data that the fire department has, but you can see again, here's the power of community action for the fire department. You know, it's their interactions with the community on these different things is giving people a really positive perception of the fire department, and they feel that they have a really kind of strong relationship with them. To kind of echo on that previous point. So those were the responses to kind of most of the questions themselves. Does anyone have any questions on those before we kind of move to the last section here?
Just when you get done with your presentation, if you send it to Archie, then Archie can send this updated, because the packet we got is old, so then we'd have a packet of what was done today, Arch, if you don't mind. So Zach, if you'd send that to Archie, then all the commissioners can have, because you have additional information we didn't get in our packet, which has been helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. So the last part is that we do benchmarking, both to cohort, so communities that resemble Fargo in terms of location, demographics, and population, and then also according to a national benchmark, so basically looking at people that have responded across the country. We do it specifically to those 4 categories, so every public safety department that we work with, they're asked these same questions in the exact same way, which allows us to kind of get these benchmark scores, which is a really important thing because the percentages are very helpful, but this provides that additional context. So rather than like a 100-point scale, like a test, it's really helping you see like, okay, well, what does a 70% mean? Is that a really great score, or is that not so much a score? And you can see that Fargo, I think one of the really powerful pieces here is that you can see Fargo is really right in line with the cohort and national benchmarks. Slightly behind on safety, slightly behind on fairness, and slightly ahead on respect and voice on these benchmarks with both the cohort and the national levels here. And so really, really strong place to be with obvious room for improvements, but definitely not negative and not lagging far behind similar cities. Any questions about the benchmarks, how we do that, or anything? I know there's a lot of text there that helps explain it.
Zach, just if you could touch on a little bit, so there were also of some of that other metadata that we'll get with this full report in terms of those beat breakdowns. There was an example you had showed us or how these were identified, by category, with some specific, statement from the person who responded. You know what I'm talking about? This additional results page, I don't know if you've got that with you or not.
Let's see, this one.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So this is we included this one as an example, basically to show you what these what the free responses look like. And so again, these are answers to what is the #1 issue or problem in your local area that you would like the police to deal with. You can see they're categorized by when they came, the date they came in, but also by the area and their demographic information, so that you're able to, and these are different ways that you can in the platform, do kind of really, really tight, deep diving into these numbers and break things down by demographics. You can also, we obviously can't provide all of these in a presentation, but they can all be exported and they can all look at, and you can look at them by category too. So if you want to see every drug response, you could do that, and you can look at every drug response from females 55 and older and white from Fargo 5, for instance, like that top comment. But you can see homeless wandering around my neighborhood, found charred foil by garage used for drug. It scares me. You can see we appreciate the police patrolling the parking lot, park and river walkway and construction site every afternoon and evening. The police presence does make a difference. And then you'd see on the bottom there, I'd say theft for sure, more specifically house and car theft. I occasionally see looted cars and hollow houses that clearly have been tampered with. Speeders, residential street, and many people speed past and even blow stop signs, especially on 35th. Extensive loud and fast cars, motorcycles on South University and other streets need more patrolling. People can get very detailed. often paragraphs long, and as you can see, very specific feedback on these that the department can really use to talk with on a patrol level and help kind of direct things, and also then provide back information to the community saying, you know, we got this feedback from you, and this is how we're responding to it.
Correct. Yeah, just to commission edification also. So our IAU is going to be able to take all of that and dump it in and give us all of those drill downs by beat. And so not only from policing those beat areas perspective, but when we go out and do the beat meetings, we'll be able to, you know, have that exact feedback there and respond back just as Zach said. So some really good additional, really detailed information in there with that piece.
So Chief, they have a concern that we're not at the national norm as far as people feeling safe. Will you come back to the commission with a plan of how to correct that, how to get people to feel more comfortable? Will there be a plan of either, you know, in each neighborhood, what we might be different, or what things you think need to be addressed? I think in the neighborhood meetings, presence has been one issue. Downtown, is there walkable patrols or people on the streets, or what are we going to have? Is there something that you'll come forth with what we learned from this, so that when we repeat the survey later, we see if there's improvements in the community? How do you take this information and what do you do with it?
Right. So it's tactical in nature. So I mean, this survey is from last fall, I think July through September. So we'll look at that with also current crime trends and utilize that in those neighborhoods. And then when we get to the beat meetings, if we get updated specific info, we'll address that. In terms of the police resources, the report that we'll give is our budget request, because the way that we improve presence is by adding police officers on the street, because we've only got so many, and we're deploying them as best as we can. So I think it's a combination of how our awareness of these issues in each beat, but also those other issues as well. So we're happy that we're moving in that direction. One other piece too, sir, just for, I think what you'll see next time, because when this was done, our traffic safety team did not have a full year out. So I would expect right out of the gate that you're going to see a reduction in traffic. In fact, our data that we have now that's online, we have a huge reduction in crashes. We have a huge reduction in traffic complaints. So I think we're already ahead of some of this information relative at least to the traffic piece.
Anything else? So am I to understand that the Archie initial survey going on in a year or so, or does Zin City come back with something else, or is this our report and we deal with it?
I think we have to discuss that internally. I believe there's a contractual issue that we'd have to talk about. Yeah, but yes.
Thank you. Any other questions by the commissioners? Thank you for the report, very informative, and we appreciate it. And I think if that, we're done with the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.